wasn't addressed to me. That's the part that still gets me, even now. It wasn't hidden behind a locked screen or buried in a deleted folder. It was sitting right there on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker, like it had every right to be there. A plain white envelope, her name on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. I almost just set it aside and went about my morning like I had every other morning for the past 34 years. Almost. I don't know what made me pick it up. Maybe it was the return address, no name, just a P.O. box in a town 40 minutes from ours. Maybe it was the way the envelope had already been opened and then pressed shut again, like someone had read it and then decided to leave it out anyway. Like it was a test, like it was an accident. I still don't know which one it was. I pulled out the letter. One page, handwritten, dated 3 weeks prior. I read it standing at the counter in my robe with my coffee going cold beside me. By the time I finished, I had to sit down. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I was 63 years old when this happened. I had worked the same regional sales territory for 31 years, raised 2 kids in the same house we bought in 1991, and I had never once, not once, given my wife a reason to doubt me. I'm not saying I was a perfect husband. I forgot anniversaries. I worked too many weekends in my 40s. I wasn't always the most emotionally available man in the room. But I showed up. I came home. I was faithful. That was never something I questioned about myself, and I never thought I'd have to question it about her either. Her name was Lorraine. Is Lorraine. We met when we were both 26, at a company picnic neither of us wanted to be at. She laughed at something I said. I can't even remember what, and that was it for me. We were married 2 years later. We had our daughter, and then our son, and then we built something together that I was proud of. Not flashy, not extraordinary by anyone else's definition, but ours, solid, real. The man who wrote that letter was named Clive. He worked at a real estate firm about 40 minutes north of us. I found that out later. What I knew from the letter itself was that he had been seeing my wife for going on 9 months, that he was 38 years old, 25 years younger than her, which I'll admit hit me in a strange place I hadn't expected, and that he was writing because he wanted to end things, but he needed her to know he wasn't going to pretend none of it happened. The last paragraph is the part that made me sit down. He wrote that he understood she had made her choice and that he respected it, but that she needed to understand the situation had become more complicated than either of them had planned for. He wrote that he had taken a paternity test. He wrote that the results were what he had suspected. He wrote that he thought she should tell her husband. I read that paragraph 4 times. Then I folded the letter back up, put it in the envelope, and went upstairs to take a shower. I didn't confront her that morning. I know that seems strange. People always ask me that, why didn't you just walk into the bedroom and throw the letter at her? And I understand the impulse. Believe me, I understand it. But I've been around long enough to know that the first move you make when you're that kind of angry is almost never the right one. I needed to think. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I said a single word. So I got dressed. I kissed her on the top of the head while she was still half asleep. I drove to the office, and for the next 3 weeks I lived what I can only describe as a double life inside my own marriage. I want to tell you it was easy to hide. It wasn't. Every time she handed me a cup of coffee or asked how my day went or reached across the couch to take my hand during the evening news, something in me went very quiet and very cold. But I held it. I smiled. I said, fine, good, not bad. I passed the green beans at dinner. I watched television I don't remember. I slept next to a woman I no longer recognized, and I kept my breathing steady until I was sure she was asleep. During those 3 weeks, I did a few things. I talked to my brother-in-law, not her brother, mine, and without telling him everything, I asked him to recommend a good attorney. He gave me a name without asking too many questions. I've always been grateful for that. I also went to the bank. Not to move money, not yet, but to understand exactly where we stood. What accounts were joint, what were separate, what the house situation looked like. My wife had her own income. She worked part-time for a nonprofit, but most of our retirement savings were accounts I had funded over 30 years of work. I needed to understand my options, and I made one phone call. To Clive. I found his number through the real estate firm's website. I called from my cell phone on a Tuesday afternoon, parked in the lot behind my office. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I told him who I was. There was a long silence. Then he said he was sorry. I told him I wasn't calling for an apology. I told him I was calling because I had some questions and I'd appreciate straight answers. He gave them to me. The affair had started at a event Lorraine had attended for the nonprofit. He had been there on behalf of a client. They had talked. One thing had led to another over a period of about a month, and then it had been going on since. He said he had tried to end it twice before the letter. He said she had convinced him to continue both times. I asked him about the paternity test. He confirmed it. He said he hadn't decided what he was going to do yet, that it was still early, that Lorraine had asked him to give her time to figure things out. He sounded uncomfortable in a way that told me he was not a bad person, just a very stupid one who had gotten himself into something he didn't know how to get out of. I told him I appreciated his honesty. I told him not to contact my wife again until he heard from me. Then I hung up, sat in my car for a while, and drove back inside to finish my afternoon. I told her on a Sunday evening we'd had a normal day. Church in the morning, we'd been attending the same congregation for 22 years, and then lunch at home and some time in the garden, where she planted things, and I mostly stood around handing her tools and pretending to be useful. We had leftover soup for dinner. I washed the dishes while she dried them, same as we had done 1,000 times before. After the dishes were done, I asked her to sit down. She knew immediately. I saw it in her face. Not surprise. Something closer to recognition, like she had been waiting for this moment and had spent a long time deciding how to look when it arrived. I put the letter on the table between us. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked up at me. "How long have you known?" she said. 3 weeks, I said. She closed her eyes. What came next was a conversation I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't, not at first, but because of how carefully I had to hold myself together to get through it. She cried. She apologized. She used the words, "It just happened." And I asked her not to use those words again, because 9 months is not something that just happens. 9 months is a decision you make over and over again every single day. She said she knew that. She said she didn't know how to explain it, that something in our marriage had felt distant for a long time, and she hadn't known how to bring it up, and she had made choices she couldn't take back, and she was sorry, she was so sorry. She would do anything. I asked her what she wanted to do about the pregnancy. She said she wanted to keep the baby. I sat with that for a moment. Then I told her I understood. That was her decision to make, and I respected it. But I also told her that I was not going to be part of that arrangement, that what she had done had ended something between us that I didn't believe could be repaired, and that I needed her to hear that clearly, without argument, without negotiation. She wept. She said she'd throw it all away, she'd cut off all contact, she'd do whatever it took. She said she couldn't imagine her life without me in it. She said we were supposed to grow old together. I told her I was already old, and I told her that the version of growing old together that I had imagined had not included this. I kept my voice even throughout. I'm honestly not sure how. There was something underneath all of it that wasn't quite anger anymore. It was quieter than anger, heavier, something that sat in your chest and didn't move. I felt it the whole time we talked, and I felt it after she went upstairs, and I sat alone in the living room until well past midnight. I called my daughter the next morning. She's 30 years old and lives about 2 hours away with her husband and our grandson. She and her mother have always been close. Closer than she and I were when she was a teenager, though we've found our way to each other more in recent years. I didn't want to call her. I knew it would hurt her in a way that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the version of her parents she'd believed in her whole life. But she needed to hear it from me before she heard it from anyone else. She didn't say much at first. She listened. Then she cried a little. Then she got quiet in that way she has when she's organizing her thoughts, and she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I was going to take care of myself. She said, "Good, Dad." That was all she said. I appreciated that she didn't try to talk me into or out of anything. She just let it be what it was. My son is a different story. He's 27, and he has his mother's temperament. Warm, expressive, quicker to feel things than to think them through. He called me that evening, which meant my daughter had told him, which I expected. He was upset. He kept saying he couldn't believe it. He asked me if I was sure, which I understood even if it stung a little. I told him yes, I was sure. He said, "What about Mom?" I told him his mother and I would be divorcing, and that she would need his support too, just as she always had. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was sorry, Dad. He was really sorry. I told him I loved him and that he didn't need to carry any of this. He said, "I know, but I'm going to anyway." I believe him. The trouble started about 2 weeks after I told Lorraine I wanted a divorce. Her family got involved. I should have expected it. It's her sister, a woman I've known for 30 years and considered, until that moment, a reasonable person, called me on a Wednesday evening and asked if we could talk. I said of course. She said she was worried about Lorraine. She said she thought we were moving too fast. She said that after 34 years, we owed it to each other to at least try counseling before making any permanent decisions. I told her I appreciated her concern. She said, "You know she loves you. This was a mistake. People make mistakes." I told her that I understood her perspective and that I wasn't interested in debating it. Then her brother called. He's a big guy, ex-football, the kind of man who has always operated under the assumption that the louder he talks, the more convincing he becomes. He told me I was being selfish, that there was a baby coming, an innocent child, and that I needed to think about what kind of man I wanted to be. That being the bigger man meant accepting the situation and moving forward as a family. I asked him if, hypothetically, his wife had spent 9 months sleeping with another man and was now pregnant with that man's child, whether he would expect me to call him and tell him to be the bigger man. He didn't answer that. I told him I wished him a good evening and ended the call. Her mother called once, briefly, mostly to cry. I told her I was sorry she was hurting. I meant that. I've always liked her mother. But the one that surprised me most was her father. He's 81 years old, has some memory issues, not severe but present. He and I have fished together probably 100 times over the years. We've sat on his back porch and talked about baseball and weather, and the particular frustrations of getting older and not having the body you used to have. I have genuine affection for that man. He called me on a Saturday morning and he said, "I hear you're leaving my daughter." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "She says she made a bad mistake." I said, "She did." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not my place. I just wanted you to know that I understand. If my wife had done something like that to me, I don't know what I would have done. But I don't think I would have been as calm as you seem to be." I told him I wasn't as calm as I seemed. He said, "I know. That's what I mean." That was the last real conversation I had with any of them. I have not spoken to Lorraine's sister or her brother since. The divorce took 7 months. I won't go through all of it, because frankly most of it is paperwork and the particular exhausting arithmetic of dividing a life into two. My attorney was excellent. A woman my brother-in-law recommended, who has been doing this for 25 years, and who has, I think, seen every variety of situation that exists. She told me early on to stay off social media, to keep my communications in writing wherever possible, and not to let the emotional temperature of any given week affect the decisions I was making for my financial future. I followed all of that advice. Because we had been married so long and both had income, the division of assets was complicated. We sold the house, the one we'd bought in 1991, the one where I'd built the deck with my own summer our son was born, the one with the maple tree in the backyard that my daughter used to climb. I got half. I found a smaller place about 20 minutes away, a 2-bedroom house on a quiet street with a little yard where I've since put in a vegetable garden that probably produces more tomatoes than any one person has a right to own. Clive, as far as I know, has been present for the pregnancy. I have not spoken to him again. I have no interest in him. He's not a villain in my story. He's just a person who made bad decisions and will now live with the particular consequences of those decisions. The baby, I've been told, was born healthy. I hold no ill will toward that child. I never have. But that child is not part of my life, and I made peace with that a long time ago. Lorraine and I have spoken a handful of times since the divorce was finalized, mostly about logistical things. A piece of mail that came to the old address, some household items we hadn't sorted out, a question about one of our daughter's health situations that she thought I should know about. The conversations are civil. They are brief. There is something in her voice sometimes that sounds like grief, and I believe that grief is real. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she did a very bad thing and then made choices that compounded it, and I think she'll carry that for a long time. That's between her and herself. I'm not going to pretend I sailed through any of this. I didn't. There were months in there where I woke up every morning with a weight on my chest that I couldn't move for the first hour of the day. I'd lie there and just breathe and remind myself that I was going to be okay, that the day ahead of me had things in it worth getting up for, and most days that was enough, and some days it wasn't. I talked to a counselor for about 6 months, something I never would have done 15 years ago because of some stubborn notion I had about what that meant about a person. Now I think refusing to do it would have been its own kind of stupidity. My daughter and grandson come down most Sunday afternoons. We eat lunch, usually something I cook, and then my grandson goes into the backyard and my daughter and I sit on the porch and talk about whatever's on our minds. She checks in with me in ways that are subtle enough that I don't feel managed, which I appreciate. She got that from her mother, actually, that particular skill. I try not to think too hard about that. My son and I talk on the phone 2 or 3 times a week. He's doing well. He got a promotion in the spring. He's saving to buy his first house. He called me when the offer was accepted, and he was so excited he could barely get the words out straight. And I sat there on my back porch and felt something that pushed right through all the rest of it. There was one evening last fall, October, the leaves just starting to come down, when I grilled a couple steaks by myself and ate outside at the little table I'd gotten for the new patio. I had a beer. I watched the yard get darker. The neighbor's dog was barking at something. Somewhere down the street, somebody was burning leaves, that smell, wood smoke in October, and I sat there for a long time just being still. I want to say I felt something profound in that moment. Maybe I did, and I just don't have the right words for it. Mostly I remember thinking that I was okay. Not fixed, not healed in some movie way, but actually okay, in the way that a man at 63 can be okay when he's been through something hard and come out the other side of it still standing. I went inside when it got cold, washed my plate, put the leftovers away, came back out to the porch with my coffee, and sat there a little longer because the night was clear and the air had that edge to it that reminds you you're alive, and I wasn't ready to go back in just yet.